So welcome. This is week 4 or 5 of our end of week webinar speaker series. Really happy to have lots of viewers this week. And I'm also very happy to have guest panelists representing the retail trade and the restaurant industry. We've got Ian Tostenson, President and CEO of the British Columbia Restaurant and Foodservices Association. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Kim.
We also have Mark Fenwick. Mark is the general manager of Woodgrove Centre, which is the largest shopping centre on Vancouver Island. I want to start off by asking an introduction, a self-introduction from you, Ian. Just let us know a little bit about the BC Restaurant and Foodservices Association, how long it's been around, what you do, and the size of your membership, if you could.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks everybody for joining in. So in my previous life, I was in the wine industry for several decades with leading up Kelowna Wines and Grand Malone Brewing and the Wine Institute. So I come from that orientation. And we sold the company in 2007, and I got into the BC Restaurant Association by sheer accident. And I said, not really, like this was like, we had a membership in the BCRFA when we had the winery, and but it's been the most exhilarating, I guess now almost 12 years, because it's nothing but a big problem solving exercise. And all throughout the last 12 years, we've done some work with Kim in Nanaimo. We used to have a chapter in Nanaimo, but it's a very difficult industry. It's membership based. We had, I say with a D, about just over 3,000 members on an industry of 15,000. But I question going forward now what that whole membership model looks like. I think that's going to change. There's no question that the importance of the Nanaimo Chamber as a gelling force, or a restaurant association as a place, especially now in the kind of crisis that we're in right now, is absolutely critical. So this, I was saying to Kim earlier, is the biggest challenge we faced. We've done 2008, we've done, the HST problems, we've done, the whole ride sharing battle. Those are nothing in comparison to what we're into right now. And as weird as this sounds, it's very, very privileged and exciting to be in an industry right now to try to help regain its footing.
Challenging times, but rife with opportunity as well. Mark, tell us a little bit about Woodgrove. Tell us something we don't know. How many stores were open in Woodgrove before the middle of March, and how many will be reopening afterwards? And I hope that's the same number, right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kim, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Woodgrove Centre is about 748,000 square feet of retail space, so that makes it the largest shopping center on the island. There were over 140 stores and services in the center, and right now we still have a handful that are operating. Those are the essential services. But it's definitely an integral part of the local economy with that kind of scale. And speaking of the local economy, when I look at the numbers for retail in Nanaimo, there's over 6,000 people working in retail. So it's actually the ` employer in the local economy. There's over 700 business licenses for retail, and it's about 15% of the local labor force. So a very important piece of the local Nanaimo economy.
That's remarkable when you think of it. And you also hold the distinction, I think, of being the largest commercial taxpayer in our city as well. So Nanaimo you clearly have a great stake in our community, and with employing that number of people. Talk about just what happened. Talk about the closure and the timeline and how that all came about, because for all of us, this seemed to hit with whirlwind speed.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I think there was a general awareness that was developing through the month of February of what was going on in other parts of the world with this new virus. And then it started to accelerate into the month of March. We were in communication with our retailers. We were hearing from them. And then around the mid part of March, many of them started closing. And I think at that time, the expectation was, hey, we'll close. we'll close for 2 weeks and then we'll reopen and everything will be fine. We didn't have a lot of information back then, so decisions were made with much less information than we have for today. So we saw signs going up in the mall saying we're closed for COVID-19. We'll be reopening March 29th. And of course, that never happened. So right now, inside the mall, there's 2 businesses that are open, and then we have a handful on the outside of the shopping center. For example, Walmart, Save on Foods, both essential services with grocery and pharmacy. And thank goodness for those retailers and their staff keeping things going.
Yeah, no kidding. Tough on them, no doubt, and just stressful being anywhere working these days. Ian, it was about the same thing in the restaurant industry. Everything was sailing along. I remember talking to friends in the restaurant industry, and one day everything seemed okay, and 48 hours later, the doors were shut and the boarding was going up. Did it seem to happen as fast for you?
You know, it's like the movie that you're watching a boat, and behind the boat is this great big wave that no one knows is coming. But there were some early signs even before this happened in our industry, and we were starting to see an overcrowding and overburden of taxation, things like the employer's health tax and property taxes, and labor rates are going up and margins are getting thinner. Restaurants run on about a 4% margin, so there's no gas in the gas tank to deal with anything. And suddenly on around the middle of March, Vancouver closed for a day with St. Patrick's. The mayor shut it down. But we were on a limited spatial distancing opening in British Columbia, and suddenly it came down and said, that's it. You know what? Only takeout and delivery, you're closed. No notice, which is fair. And so it literally shuttered us within 24 hours. And so you've got, the business owner has staff, as they do in retail. They have all their food and all that stuff that has to be dealt with. The most comment I got then, and we reached out. So what we did is went into super action to become the resource center for our industry at bcrfa.com, because we recognized that the business owner needed as much information breaking as they could possibly get, and we did that. And we opened ourselves up 24/7. I published my cell number. I did everything to make sure that we were out there. And the biggest comment we got from everybody was, I don't know what's going on here, but how do I take care of my staff? And I sort of thought, that's so typical hospitality, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, what about my lease and all about me? It's all about my staff. And so CERB actually helped that a lot. That was very quick, a very good program to get some income into the hands of the workers as stage one. But then since then, it's been a muddling, roadway of trying to figure out, when this ends, when it starts, what the programs are, especially for rent. And that's one of the big issues we have to solve right now. So I was just saying to you earlier, Kim, it's a really interesting challenge. I mean, it's a disaster, don't get me wrong, but to be in a position to try to sort this out for industry, because the small business person is got so many things to think about. They need to have the comfort that somebody's looking out for them and navigating down this river for them. And so that's where we sit today.
We're certainly finding that out, that information rules right now. We've been pumping out 25 stories a week under the Stay Strong banner, trying to pump a little sunshine out there for people and try to also provide some clear direction around government programs and supports. And people are definitely eating it up because it's so confusing what's happening and very difficult to navigate all by oneself. Mark, how do you feel the supply chain is holding up or will be holding up if we get back to, if we start to go into recovery and restart mode soon?
Well, I expect that the supply chain will be all right. We can see that other countries like China and Southeast Asia, as they're reopening gradually, they're making things work. So there may be some slight hiccups, but in general, the supply chain is going to work in retail. And then the other interesting thing, of course, too, having been closed for almost 2 months, there will be some built up inventories or inventories that haven't been sold. So there'll be lots of product for people when they return to stores.
How do you see that return happening, Mark? Do you see it being a real bounce back, or do you think there'll be some delays and perceptions on people's minds that they still shouldn't go out? There's still some threat, some health threat out there, or give me a sense of what you're thinking will happen.
Sure. Well, I think top of mind, the first priority is the safety and security. That's of the utmost importance to Woodgrove Centre, our owner, Ivanhoe Cambridge. We are and we will continue to be implementing all the health authority guidelines and directives. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the reopening next week. I think this past week will go down as a bit of a pivot in that we are now looking forward to the reopening, and we'll have everything in place on what's required. We know that there will be personal protective equipment, PPE is the acronym, that people will want to be wearing, whether they're customers or staff in the stores. But we'll look to the exact guidelines from the BC government and the health authorities on what the requirements will be. And we've seen in other provinces, they've said so many people per square meter, or so many people in the store based on areas, on top of the requirement for the 6 foot, 2 meter distancing. So we'll be complying with all that and have that in place and be welcoming our customers back.
I imagine the mall will have to take the same type of precautions as we see when we go to the grocery store or the liquor store, where you have that spacing and there's graphics and signage that helps you determine if you're in the right place at the right time and things like that. I think we're going to start to reflect on that as the normal way to go out in public and the normal way to conduct ourselves in these social settings. I think that's going to be really challenging, and of course, very challenging for restaurants too. Ian, you mentioned that you took a proposal to the Premier just this week, identifying how restaurants can resume business and how they can get up and running. I imagine that there's some phased process in that. Do you want to give us a little idea what we can expect? And what was in your proposal and how you think that's going to roll out?
Yeah, it's a fascinating story because prior to almost a week and a half ago, we had been formulating plans on what does that look like. And we thought, so this, for anybody that's in the situation, if you can be proactive right now with the government if you're in a sector, I was talking to someone in the salon business to see if they're doing this, is that you've got to coalesce, you've got to put together a plan to get it to government and say, this is our plan to deal with two things. As Mark said, is public safety and public confidence. And the confidence is so important from a retail restaurant perspective. So on the Monday just passed, a week and a half ago, Dr. Henry said, I'd like to hear from the restaurants to see how they're going to pull this off. Within about 24 hours, we'd assembled 55 of the brightest restaurants owners in British Columbia. We'd sent out the night before a document that outlined all the best practices that we put together from various restaurant groups in the United States to say, here's what we have to do. And we had 3 meetings. The last one concluded this Tuesday. We produced a report. We published the report. We didn't publish it, but we had it all designed and over to the Premier's office by yesterday afternoon. He called us to underline the importance. He called me last, which I never get a call from the Premier, not that often, but he said, hi, Ian, it's John Horgan. I thought, yeah, I almost said, I'm Mickey Mouse, like really, like who is this now, right? But it was John Horgan, and he was sincere. He was really interested in working with the economy to get it back. He knows in our case, there's 190,000 people in our sector. We're third behind retail in terms of the largest employer in the province, and there's 15,000 restaurants that are sidelined right now. So with about 80% of them totally closed and 20% doing takeout delivery with they can add alcohol now, which was a great add-on by the government. But we put the report in. It deals with virtually everything you can possibly imagine. So visual cues when you would go to a restaurant, seeing sanitation stations, you may see gloves and masks for those that are handling dishes. You'll see separation of kitchen. You'll see temperature checks of the staff, so that you can be assured that your server, who will keep a distance, has been checked out health-wise. That server will be happy. If there's any issue with respect to how they're feeling, they'll be sent home and taken care of. You're going to see probably something on the doorway that indicates the business owner went through some awareness training on COVID, how to operate a restaurant in a new era. And we're saying that, without that, you probably shouldn't be able to open, because we've got one chance to do this right. If we open and then we blow it, it's going to be really hard to come back, especially with such low confidence. You'll see social distancing. And the other thing, and Kim, I want this to happen in Nanaimo. Dr. Henry keeps talking about get outside, and I think she's going to be very encouraging next week about what Manitoba did. Is they kept the pressure on takeout and deliveries, that keep doing that, but they opened patios, and they opened patios before they opened in-house dining. And so we're going to look to see how flexible we can get. The worst thing that can happen right now is we get bogged down with municipal red tape. Can't do this. It's going to take 10 months to open a patio. We got to move fast. We got to expand these patios in very creative ways. Let the people get outside, social distance. But we have two things to do here. Is that we've got to entertain the public a bit too. We have a duty to get people feeling good about themselves. And so, City of Vancouver declared they want to start using these empty streets and stuff to open up patios in a very creative way. And I think that we're going to see a lot of municipalities doing that. Restaurants will be 50% capacity, but as Mark knows, that's not going to get you very far. They're not going to make any money at 50%. You're going to need to be at least 75% capacity. But I think what will happen is you'll see 2 weeks of very restricted, try it on, see how it feels. And I think that we're probably into June before this happens, by the way. And then maybe in the middle of June. And then I think another 2 weeks it'll open up. And I think probably in a couple of months, we'll be able to operate a bit more freely, depending what's going on externally. But it's going to be a staged process. And I would like to take a bet to see whether it's going to be, how reluctant people are. I think the reluctancy is going to be based on how well we do our job. If they see a sign on a restaurant that says, "Come on in, we're trained," I think that's going to be a lot better than just walking to a restaurant going, "Gee, I hope." So it's a new era. It's a big challenge. There's, probably 13,000 restaurants we would have to get to do that program. But we think we can pull it off with the help of the health authorities and WorkSafe. And so I think if we don't do that kind of approach, I think we're going to have a hard time getting the public to buy into a quicker recovery.
Sounds like an extremely well thought out plan. Mark, are you aware of a similar plan coming from the retail council or coming through the industry, through the retail industry?
Sure. Yeah, first off, Ian, some great points there, and hats off to your association and your group for reacting so quickly and getting the proposal, working papers in the government and getting response. That's fantastic. I know in Canada, the Retail Council of Canada is a very important and leading body. They are a great resource for retailers. They're member-based, but they do provide a lot of information on their website, retailcouncil.org, that retailers can dive into and gather. So they've got tremendous resources. And I would encourage small business people to look at that and take away the parts that work for them. Locally at Woodgrove, we're putting together lots of information. We'll have a welcome back booklet for our retailers as a guide, and they'll be making their own plans, of course, as well. But again, it's all about safety and health, security. We're going to be doing our utmost to adhere to all the guidelines and create that environment that's welcoming and gives people that confidence that, hey, you know what, this is safe. I can be here. I can do my shopping that I've been wanting to for the last month, and feel like they can come back again. So we're ramping up cleaning. We'll have extra resources in several areas, and the signage component is important to promote the physical distancing, what's being done, the protocols that we're following. And it's going to look a little different as well when you walk into our food court. In the initial weeks, I don't expect that you'll be able to sit down. It will probably be a takeout format only. And so it's different. It's definitely a challenge. It's unprecedented. So we've been planning for it. We're up for it, and we look forward to welcoming customers back in the near future.
I could only imagine. And you started to mention the food court there, and I was going to reflect on food court and how the BC RFA addressed that subject, because restaurants come in all sorts of different categories and sizes and shapes. And so I don't expect that there can be a one-size-fits-all approach to this. Can you specifically address if you had spoken specifically about food courts in your plan to the Premier?
Yeah, not specifically, but Mark is absolutely right. It's going to be social distancing in this period. So, and probably don't want a bunch of, see, the one thing that she keeps saying, Dr. Henry, is that we don't want large crowds of people. So they're not going to be too happy about a food court. There's no question. But eventually they'll say, okay, we can organize this now. So you can keep the tables a certain distance away. And the food court will probably be very similar to what happens in a restaurant, is that the tables will be spaced a certain way. You'll have to keep a certain distance from when you order your food. So it's all basically the same principles that we're dealing with, whether, it's really just another, food court is like the inside of a big restaurant, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so those principles will apply. It's interesting listening to Mark talk. I think we both have this responsibility, as odd as it sounds. When I go to, we live in North Vancouver, when I go out, and I try to smile and talk to people and stuff. That's my nature. But I find people are kind of down, and they kind of go, "Whoa, you get too close," or "You went down the aisle the wrong way," and they get pissed off. Pardon my language. And I sort of go, you know what? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, and I try to correct it. But I think that we have a responsibility in hospitality and retail to try to lift people up. I mean, that's just part of this, is providing the physical environment. But I think, I'm thinking about going to a mall and just having a little bit of levity and a little bit of lightness about this, even if we're maybe wearing masks or whatever. I said once, so you go to a restaurant, someone's wearing a mask, who cares? It's not forever. It's just temporarily. But in the meantime, I can go to my mall, I can go to my restaurant and get on with my life. I think that psychological side of this is going to be equally as strong because I know that Mark can deliver the physical goods in his mall, and I know that we can deliver the safety in restaurants. But what we can't do is deliver that attitude by the consumer to get them feeling, and they've been battered and they've lost their jobs. But as they come back, I think we really want to be that encouraging factor.
Very interesting watching the human behavior right now when you go out shopping. And yeah, there's a lot of tension in the air sometimes. People are uncomfortable with the surroundings, uncomfortable about how they're supposed to behave, and which aisle is which direction, and don't get too close to me, and why are you coming inside my 6-foot bubble, and all those sorts of things. I think that people's nerves will relax a little bit when they realize that they're part of reopening and they're part of the restart. They're not part of the shutdown anymore. Just turning that psychological corner is going to make a big difference in people's moods and that, we hear the term retail therapy, and it's a bit of a jocular term, but now it's being recognized as a real contributor to mental health, that getting out and being with people and interacting with staff in stores and things like that. And sometimes it's not even about the buying, it's just about the being out there and doing. Mark, you had quite a crowd of seniors who gather regularly to get their exercise by walking the mall and then enjoying their social interaction with a coffee and a muffin afterwards. Others are accustomed to visiting the mall just for their favorite fast food place and to enjoy some guilty pleasures and dip it into a big poutine or something like that. Horgan said this week that we need to get people shopping again to open the economy.
Mhm.
We need to get retail back. And I thought that was a real phenomenal statement that he made, specifically identifying retail as the key to the economic engine in BC. Can you comment on that?
Yes, good points. And to build really on what Ian was saying, that yeah, just lifting people up will be important. The mall has always been a very social place, so we're looking to welcome people back. And I also wanted to make the point that in these really difficult times, and I think we've all heard this before, that we're all in this together. Each of us has to do our part to support the community well-being. And we're fortunate at Woodgrove Centre, our owner, Ivanhoe Cambridge, is the owner and manager. And we're united in solidarity in supporting the retailers through this difficult time, and all businesses across the city. It's a very difficult time. So we'll be doing everything we can to support them. And what the reopening looks like, we'll have some more indications as we hear from the health authorities and BC government next week. But yeah, we're looking forward to seeing customers back inside the mall. It's a very social experience. It's a cultural experience. It's an economic experience to do shopping. The marketplace, the main street, the mall, it's just part of our economy. It's part of who we are.
Yeah, you mentioned Main Street, and I think that's the most striking, is if we do drive down our main streets, and Ian had mentioned it earlier about, Gastown and Robson Street in Vancouver. Here, our downtown is Commercial Street, Wesley Street, and Fitzwilliam Street. And it's certainly remarkable to go down there and see them so vacated. I've told the story before, but a week or two into this, I went downtown just because I need to go downtown and get my downtown fix and just see what's going on and see if anybody's open, and pop my head in and wave hello with scarf pulled up over face, of course. But I was walking down Commercial Street, and there was a couple walking a dog across the street, and the dog started barking at me like crazy from across the street. And what have I done wrong? What's going on? And I kind of looked over at them and gave them a puzzled look. And she said, "Look out, look out, look out." So I'm looking up thinking something's falling off a building onto me or something. And she said, "No, look down, look down." So I looked down, and about 6 feet away from me is an otter walking down Commercial Street. And I'm like, okay, the wild animals are now roaming Main Street in Nanaimo. We've totally lost it. We're all going to hell in a handbasket now. An interesting question came up online here. Do you think that every business will need to submit to the minister a safe plan for opening, or are plans and guidelines going to be available to all to follow? So it's just, you'll get the rule book and it will be proceed as you've been told. And I imagine that there will be others who are out checking, or perhaps any problems are found through a complaint-driven process. For both industries, retail and restaurant. Imagine that will be a very strict plan that everybody will have to adhere to.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in restaurants, because we have food and closed environments, for sure. If you are, I suppose, doing massages and physiotherapy and salons, that's where I think they need to jump out and do a specific plan and help Dr. Henry make that decision, because she's sitting here going, okay, well, how do I muster this? And I mean, imagine if the salons got together and said, this is our plan, this is our standard, because they were regulated at one point, but they're not regulated now. But we're going to come together, we're going to set a standard, we're going to police the standard, we're going to work with you. I think the confidence of Dr. Henry is higher now to say, okay, you know what? I'll buy into that, and here's how we're going to monitor that. But I think if we just kind of don't do that and cluster and take the leadership sectors to do that. Now, retail is a bit different because it's got so many moving parts. But I'm talking about my neighbor's a dentist, and what they're going to have to go through to become a dentist again in the new world is like hazmat suits, and it's really expensive and it's really slow and very cumbersome. But again, at just the initial stages, so that the technical industries will have to, I think, need to address their own particular. I mean, Dr. Henry doesn't know everything. She's very, very bright and she's awesome, but she needs help. So anybody that's listening to this that's in that, I would be on the phone and trying to coalesce those groups to help Dr. Henry.
Yeah, very good. Interesting question came in here on restaurants from Mina from Futurepreneur. Hello, Mina. How about restaurants and bars where there's a seating area, but people also stand and socialize? Will that be verboten, or will it just be harder for them to open?
Initially, it's going to be, because you're going to want to make sure that people don't sort of cross those boundaries of physical distancing. So stage one, it'll be you're at a table, you're distance from another table. If you want to sit at the bar, I would imagine that would be every second seat would probably have to be taped off. And if it's a bartender, there probably has to be plexiglass. So whether business owners want to go down that road for a short period of time, they might just be better off in those kind of circumstances of bars just to keep it closed, get people sitting down. And that's the plan, because if we get into a situation where people are in restaurants and walking around, hanging out, just kind of, losing the discipline here, I can guarantee you that it's going to come down again and say, you know what, we can't be doing that. I mean, even to the point that I think most restaurants will have to have some very rigid controls over washrooms. I would imagine too, Mark, in shopping centers, to make sure we don't get overcrowding the washrooms. But again, it's not going to be for 2 years. It might be for a couple months. So who cares? Like, we can do that.
Interesting question, interesting perspective came in here from a viewer. Mark, you might want to get this one. Is in retail stores, how will you protect the public when other people are trying on clothes, for example? I don't want to try on something that somebody has just tried on before me.
That's a good question, because quite often that's part of the experience. Is you want to make sure you've got a great fit with that top or a pair of pants. And honestly, right now, I don't have the answer for that. I'm sure the retail community is looking at that. Do they need to be treating things? Or perhaps they might have to say that it is, at this time, it's quite possible that there wouldn't be an opportunity to try it on. I'm just not sure at this moment.
Yeah.
But, all sorts of scenarios will be looked at, and there'll be adaptation as we go, and learn from the feedback that customers provide. And one thing the Retail Council said, which I tend to agree with, is that, what does this look like? Well, we know it's going to be different. We know it's going to be challenging, and we'll have to be operationally adaptable to what happens over the next few months. So I think those are some words of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ian, you were mentioning before we went live to air that you've got a program that you're going to be launching from the BC RFA during recovery, or as part of the recovery process, called Eat, Drink Local.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
We've been running this program for about 2 or 3 years, and we get about 500 restaurants throughout British Columbia participating. And the cheerleader behind this program is Lana Popham, who is just a fabulous agricultural minister. She's a real cheerleader. When this happened, we decided we had to, as Mark says, shift our thinking here. It's a great program, but it needs to be so inclusive now. So it's got to go all across British Columbia. It's got to be free for everyone to participate. It's got to include private retailers, liquor retailers. It's got to include the BC Wine Institute. It's got to include the craft brewers of British Columbia and the pubs, and anybody that touches anything in our sector that's eat or local, to celebrate that. And so we want people to go to Vancouver Island. We want people to go to Nanaimo and taste in restaurants. We want them to go to shopping malls. We need to, and the idea here, the big idea, is not just to stimulate our sector, but to get people out traveling and say, I'm going to go to the Caribou and I'm going to hang out with some restaurants, here or there. I'm going to go to Prince George, because there's not going to be a lot of tourism outside of British Columbia for probably a couple of years, right? So, and the government's really behind this. And so I can, it's going to be probably come eat, drink local, shop British Columbia. It's going to be all those different things to get people, again, to sort of, put their money into the economy here and really think twice about where they spend. Someone said today, I read something this morning, by the way, the money you're getting from CERB is Canadian money, so make sure you buy Canadian goods and don't buy goods from over abroad. I thought that's well said. Go into Amazon and start buying stuff from China, right? I mean, let's kind of really pull back on that kind of thinking a bit and rethink it.
Yeah, I think this will help us reset that switch and understand the importance of buying local and seeing people employed in shops and seeing your neighbors at the mall, working in their stores. It's going to be a great thing when we get there. And I think this has been a good reminder of how important local merchants are to us and what we owe them in terms of our business loyalty. Another great question came in here. So once restrictions begin to lift, there's many debates on the future of delivery services and whether they will continue to flourish or phase out. What are your thoughts on this moving forward?
Mark?
Yeah, sure. I can start with that. I think that this pandemic will bring out some innovations. One of them is that we've already seen is the term curbside delivery. So we've got a couple of our retailers doing that. I think more will follow. And what that means is a customer can drive up to a parking spot close to the store or the mall and let someone know they're there, and then the staff will come running out, deliver their parcel, and away they go. So there's convenience, there's that element of safety. There's some real positives to that, and I think that could be happening on the meal side as well. I know at Woodgrove Centre, White Spot, the restaurant offers a takeout. They'll bring it out to your car, or you can just walk up to the front door. So they've been doing that as well as delivery. So that's just one example of some of the changes that we'll see. And I think another change is the opportunity to provide a little bit more tailored service. If there's a limited number of people in your store, you're used to having 2 or 3 or 4 at once. And if there's only one, well, hey, that's a great opportunity to provide a more personalized service from 6 feet away. But that might be different from what was going on before.
Yeah, I heard a really interesting comment from Bruce Allen just this week, and talking about the new normal and about going into a shop where somebody might be wearing a mask or gloves, and keeping their 6-foot distance from you, but actually the level of customer service is going to be a great deal higher because that person isn't dealing with 3 people standing at the counter at once. They're dealing with you and they're focused on you. And so that'll be an interesting experience to see how that changes our etiquette when shopping. And as good, polite Canadians, of course, we're all going to be wanting to help each other out throughout this thing. And
yeah, there's a real tension there because we've been away from each other to some degree physically, and that's a basic human need. And yet when people come out to shop or go to the restaurant, there's going to be some nervousness and, oh, can I talk to you? Where can I be? Where can I sit? So it's going to be an interesting tension that will resolve itself over time. And I see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Delivery is interesting. You raised some, so Mark, my wife will love you because she's the VP of marketing for White Spot. So unprompted, you said that. So thanks. I know she'll love that. But there's an interesting story there. We're seeing that on the takeout and delivery side, we're seeing that brands that are familiar are the ones that are doing a really good job right now. We've gone back to comfort and familiar and not so much experimentation. That happened in 2008. People go right back to what makes them feel good from food. You just think about what you're drinking and eating at home or cooking at home. Delivery, it was on its way to explosion in our industry prior to COVID. It was probably 20 to 25% now of the industry of sales, but it's being driven by primarily Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, and DoorDash. But what the business interest in that is that they're charging 25 to 35 or 25 to 30 percentage points to the restaurant as a commission to deliver their food. Well, there's nothing left for a restaurant at that margin. So Following in what's happening in the United States, Los Angeles, San Francisco, now Seattle have capped those fees at 15%, saying you're trying to take advantage of these industries that have no other choice but to deliver. You know, Dr. Henry doesn't necessarily want us doing a whole bunch of curbside, sort of saying stay home. So now people go, okay, I'll have it delivered, but the restaurant is having a real tough time financially. So we've made that request to government to cap those fees. I think Mark is right. It's here to stay. Irrespective of COVID or not, people like that convenience. I mean, if you look at Netflix and all that stuff going on, people like to be able to sort of stay home and have their wine. And now you can order your white spot and order a bottle of wine with it, which is something you couldn't do before that. So there is innovation that's afoot here, and it's going to really, really change it. I mean, I worry a little bit about the footprints of some of these very large restaurants that built, that were, needing to do $10-15 million a year in downtown Vancouver. Those are tough venues that are going to have a really hard time to get the kind of economic activity in order to run them, and it's going to be tough for the little guys. So I mean, the other like it was only 3 months ago. One of the programs that we were running and doing really well at was bringing in skilled foreign workers for kitchens in British Columbia. Yeah. And we couldn't bring them in fast enough. And I think last year we recruited, and these are really high quality individuals, people that want to become Canadian citizens. And I think we brought in last year 1,000. Now, I don't know where that program is going to go, but I do think that when this settles, we're still going to have a labor shortage. I mean, the demographics didn't change. There's going to be more maybe unemployment, but they're not necessarily going to be trained to cook in kitchens. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that time will sort out here, but pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. BC Chamber conducted a survey as part of its bcmindreader.com program, and it was on business owner operator confidence in the future. And in the survey, 8% of the 2,000 businesses in BC that responded, 8% clearly said, we're done. They knew this already. This is data coming from 10 days ago or so. And there was another 38% that answered, we're not sure about our future. And then 53 or whatever the number that's left said, we're going to make it, we're going to do okay. But 38% not having confidence in their ability to survive this and get through. Do you feel that the restaurant industry is in somewhat parallel kind of numbers in terms of confidence?
Yeah, we have a pretty high churn to begin with, because let's be honest. I mean, some people get the restaurant business; they should never do it. I mean, this is a business that needs operational. It's all about costing. It's all about how you buy. It's all about all those different things. It's a very precise business. Retail is, I'm sure, the same way. I mean, it's all about margins. And so if you have 15,000 restaurants, we know the same numbers. 10% are not coming back, so that's 1,500 businesses gone. And we think that on the verge of tipping, it could be as high as another 20%. Mm-hmm. So that's 30%. That's 4,500 restaurants that may just vacate because they don't want deferrals. They don't want. I mean, it's fine if the government say, "Well, we'll defer this," and they look at it again. In September, I'm coming back to a wall of deferrals and a wall of rent that I owe, and it's just not worth it because it's taken me so many years to unbury myself. I think there's a lot of that's going on. But then they say in the restaurant business, the first guy comes in, he goes broke. The second guy comes in and he goes broke. It's the third guy that buys the assets for basically nothing and cuts the deal with the landlord on good rent. That's got a fairly good chance of stabilizing themselves, because if you can get through the first year or two, you're probably going to be able to have a brand that's sustaining. But it's too many people spend too much money getting into it and they get stuck, and there's no backup plan. It's a cash business, and it requires a lot of customers every day to keep that going.
Yeah. Someone's asked the question about the impact of the pandemic and current needs for distancing. So for both retail and restaurants, what do you think the impact is going to be on new builds and new store openings? Mark, do you want to start off with that one?
Um, I think there'll be some caution for sure going forward. Um, we might see some delays with people's plans because the focus for a retailer, whether they have one location or several, is going to be getting those operations back up and running, getting them as profitable as can before they want to expand further.
Mhm.
But it's really going to depend upon the company and the resources and the category of business as well. I think will dictate that. But at Woodgrove Centre, I know of a couple of situations that will likely be delayed a few months or possibly even a full year into next spring. So, um, yeah, it's. I think the first order of business is to be back up and running and ramping that up to the new normal or the old normal.
And from the restaurant industry perspective, what do you think, Ian? Do you see new ventures coming out post-COVID, and what will they look like? Because I guess if I was going to be opening a restaurant, I'd be looking at what my square footage is and my front of house space so that I could be profitable, but still be operating within safe parameters.
Yeah, I think you're hearing that. It's exactly what Mark's saying is let's get stable and then let's look for opportunities. In talking to some, the landlords down here, they're not interested, as Mark would say, in any empty tenancies. So there's going to be a lot of good opportunities to get into restaurant premises. You're going to probably see restaurants redesigned though, that you have less staff. So you might go into a nice restaurant, but have to go to the counter and order and go pick up your food and avoid the labor costs. That's going to be a trend. You're going to see restaurants designed to do more. I actually am involved in a nonprofit restaurant in the downtown east side of Vancouver, where we train the homeless, but now we're feeding the homeless, and we're doing about 1,500 meals a day. And what we're seeing now, when you look through that, a lot is an upswing in commissaries. So you're seeing a lot of commissaries that have built up, and they're doing packaged meals. So families go, you know what, I want the convenience. So I want 3 meals on Thursday delivered. That whole market is exploding. So commissaries, yes, multifunctional use of the restaurant, more than having a bunch of empty seats, lowering or increasing the efficiency of that space. And probably, unfortunately, not a time to be doing this, but lowering their labor costs, because that's, it's 30% of the cost of running a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
At least.
Interesting question came up here, and I know neither of you can probably answer it, but it's worthy of a moment of conversation, I think. The viewer asks, if a business is not ready or able to afford to remediate their business to the new safety plans and standards, do you think that there's going to be grants or funds announced to help cover costs of modifying?
Yeah, I'll speak to that, Kim. Like I said before, we all have to support the well-being of our community, which includes the business community. Woodgrove Centre and Ivanhoe Cambridge were united in helping retailers through this difficult situation, these circumstances. And Ian touched on the idea of rent, and that's, of course, a very big concern with cash flow where it's at. We really support the initiatives taken by the federal government to help as many commercial businesses as possible get through these times. For us, we're just waiting for some more details on the eligibility criteria and how they may apply to our tenants. So we're looking forward to getting more information on that SECRA program so that the tenants, retailers that do qualify can get the rent relief that they're looking for.
Yeah. Wrapping up here, we're closing in on the final minute or two of our 50-minute program. So Ian, do you want to say a few words in parting?
Well, thanks, Kim. This is. It's interesting to be able to explain some of the stuff. Some of the stuff that Mark and I have been talking about is not, you can't read it in the paper. It's the sort of behind the scenes. So thank you for doing that. I would say thank you to the people involved in this today for supporting their local restaurants. Never forget you could buy a gift certificate to a retailer or a restaurant now that puts some cash in their products. You can save it for later. All those little things that do, and they don't have to be big things. They could be $20, but all those different things will help that local economy in Nanaimo, which is just a microcosm of the same problems all throughout British Columbia. Just take that first step forward. So I just want to say thanks, Kim, for inviting me on.
Well, thanks for being here. Retail and restaurants are really the bellwether of what's happening in our communities, and you emphasize that, Mark, with quoting some of those numbers of number of staff working there and size of the contribution to the economy. Can you give us a couple of words in closing, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Yes, it's as I said earlier, it's over 6,000 people that we're talking about working in retail. So it's hats off to the ones that have carried on working in the essential businesses, and I'm sure most others are looking forward to getting back to work as we can get things reopened in the next few weeks. We'll learn more next week. We're going to be very supportive of those health guidelines to keep everyone safe, the staff, our employees, and of course the customers. We're looking forward to them coming back and experiencing something a little bit more social than what they've had at home on their own. So yeah, it'll be nice to see.
Fantastic. Well, that takes us to the end of our 50 minutes, guys. I really appreciate your time and your input. The discussion is great. Lots of interest out there, a bunch of questions I couldn't get to, and I'm going to try and answer some of those myself online here. But really excited that you were both able to do this today, because retail and restaurants are so important to our economy and to ourselves socially and culturally as well. Thanks very much. And next Friday, end of week webinar will be real estate construction and development. I'll be announcing my guests for that on Monday. So thanks very much. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mark. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Ian.
I'll talk to you both offline.
Bye, guys.